midst of a huge transformation where our peers, communities, and workplaces are all really melding into one. Welcome to Reimagining Company Culture. My name is Christina Giordano, she, her, and hers, and I'm the Senior Partnerships Manager here at AllVoices. Today, I'm super excited to welcome our next guest onto the interview series, Liz Hall. She is the Chief People Officer at Splash. Liz, thanks for being here. If you want to share a little about yourself for our listeners, including your pronouns, and when you were younger, do you remember how you answered the question, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for having me. Pronouns, she, her, hers. I appreciate you asking. And what did I want to be when I grow up? Earlier on, I wanted to be a photographer with my own art gallery. I wanted to work in the music industry. Those were my focuses through college. I worked in production and radio and television, and where I ended up is not where I thought I'd be. So it's been a long, winding journey. I also wanted to be a backup dancer, which never happened because I can't dance. So a lot of creative endeavors that I don't have.
I always say one of my dream jobs is to be one of J-Lo's backup dancers.
That's funny.
But to just, have the exercise. It looks so fun. So I love
Mine was Janet Jackson. I have no idea why, but mine, yeah.
I mean, I would love that too. We could do it. And you fast forward to today, you're Chief People Officer at Splash. How do you think your personal journey has really led you up until this point, specifically at Splash as well?
Yeah, sure. Personal journey. So honestly, totally related to where I originally started, being a young woman in the entertainment industry, certainly had a lot of bumps along the way. And when I finally landed in tech, for me personally and my own personal values, people always come first, and making sure there were equitable and inclusion elements to any workplace. I stumbled upon in 2005, an office manager job at Fog Creek Software with Joel Spolsky and Michael Pryor. And for the next 12 years, I worked with them building out 3 companies. So that was Fog Creek, Stack Overflow, and Trello. So a lot of building and growing and lessons learned with them. I then helped the team through its acquisition by Atlassian, did that integration, worked for Atlassian for a little bit. And then I was head of people at a fintech real estate company, and then landed back to a product-led company at Splash, nearing 3 years, and couldn't be happier.
Congrats. That's awesome.
Thanks.
And you mentioned kind of values and, that people first approach. I know there's been kind of a ton of focus on really organizations focusing on that foundation of their values, the mission and the vision of the organization. How does kind of your mission and vision at Splash manifest in the recruitment process from, day one, onboarding, to the first performance review of an individual?
Yeah, great question. So for me, a people team is the entire employee life cycle. And so whether you're recruiting or HR or diversity, equity, inclusion, we're one team. And so we make sure everything we do is weaved into the entire experience. We live our core values at Splash, and we make sure that's incorporated in recruiting from the very beginning. And we actually just published on our career page our culture book. And that's something that was a year in the making that involved everyone at the company. And that goes over who we are, how we live our values, how we meet and gather, how we communicate, employee life cycle, everything that you would want to know about a company, we're putting out there to hold us accountable. And it's a living document. So we will continue to revisit it with our employees. But we put people first in the candidate experience, and that shows. And through new hire onboarding, our surveys internally say that, it's one of the best new hire onboardings they went through. And it's really focused on them, right? Making sure they have the information they need, they meet the right people, especially in a remote world, right? Onboarding has to be really intentional. And then we care about our people through actions, right? And so not too long ago, we had a demo day where the people team presented to the entire company our vision for 2022 and our goals and how we hope to achieve those goals. and it's to make our employees part of the process. We want to be approachable, we want to be helpful, and so we really want to make sure people know who we are and what you can come talk to us about. One of the examples I can give is we recently added a new core value called take care.
Okay.
And that was born out of pandemic, global and political injustice and upheaval, and just our employees were getting burned out mentally, not because of the work. And I think that's the trend we saw that caused the great resignation, is folks all of a sudden put that before anything else.
Mm-hmm.
So culture, how they're treated, mission became the number one thing we heard from our candidates. And so with our take care value, we released something called me days, which are mental escape days. And they're 2 full days a month that employees can take, and we encourage them. And that's in addition to all the other paid time off. So we really try and live our values, and hopefully it shows.
Yeah, I think
that was a long answer to a small question, so apologies.
No, you're good. Our listeners, and I appreciate those specific examples too. I think the value of time and the me days is really important, and having an onboarding program, especially from the candidate experience to the first day, the first 90 days, it's really important to really live your values, and the expectations you had when you signed your offer, is that what is actually happening within the organization. Can you share a little bit more about how you evolved your onboarding program since the beginning of this remote work shift? I think you've hired close to 195 folks in the last year, which is a lot of people.
Yeah, it's over half our company at this point. So one of the things, we completely revamped our new hire onboarding, and it went through a few iterations. But one of the things we do is a lot of touch points before the start date.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not just a really fun swag box, but they have insight actually into what their first day and week will look like, who they're meeting, what their calendar would be. They have all their equipment before they start. They have all the information of where to log in. They kind of have a cheat sheet of who's who, and it is a way to really get them, remove the nerves in a way. And then we have a updated orientation where we go through everything splash that an employee could ask questions about. And we actually established new hire classes. So to make sure people aren't just starting alone in a remote world, we found that there's more comfort in someone else starting with you. So we created these classes to help build those relationships early on. Mm-hmm. In addition, we added in quarterly executive meet and greets, fireside chats. So each executive meets with all new hires from that quarter, and they talk a little bit about themselves, what brought them to Splash, all the type of questions you're asking me, but more importantly, really giving that face time and making all of us, from to the CEO, more approachable. We want to give everyone access to the leadership team. So that's something that we didn't have before. When you're in the office, you might walk by someone and say, oh, hey, you're the new hire. That doesn't exist anymore. So our new hire onboarding process has just been revamped with a lot of intentional connections. And then we check in with them from HR. We continuously check in on them, and then have an official 90-day connect where we want to make sure things are going well, the manager and them are on the same page, answer any concerns. So those are just a few ways that we change the new hire onboarding.
Yeah, creating that meaningful connection with accessibility to executives, leadership, to people who might not work with on a day-to-day basis is really important, because those moments of just like running into each other in the office, running each other when you're switching conference rooms, you need to make sure that it's intentionally done, as you were talking about. We're talking about new hires and people who joined over the past year. I want to kind of shift to current talent, especially, you mentioned the great resignation, the great reshuffle, when people are really thinking about am I growing at this organization? What kind of work am I doing for 40 plus hours? How are you thinking about intentionally growing and fostering the current team at Splash?
Yeah, so that was a lot of what we talked about during our demo day. You know, we brought on such amazing talent. Let's make sure we keep the amazing talent. So a lot this year is going to be focused on learning and development resources that are slightly different focused.
Okay.
And that is based off of feedback from the employees. What they give us, we shape back to them. So we do employee NPS surveys every quarter, and
Mhm.
we actually won a Best Places to Work award last year, but it was very intensive,
Right.
where the employees did a ton of surveys with comments as well. So we were able to get that anonymized feedback. And we also partner with Collective, a diversity, equity, and inclusion firm that we absolutely love. And so between the three different platforms of receiving anonymous surveys information, we're able to pull out themes. And what we're hearing from our employees is to really refine a high performance culture.
Mhm.
How do we hold each other accountable? That's in line with our values. How do we hold ourselves accountable? That's in line with our values. And so instead of a more basic manager training, we've done a lot of different trainings in the past. We're really going to have a focus on conflict resolution and delivering tough feedback. We have a range of experienced managers to those brand new managers, which are, very common in startups. And we want to make sure they have the tools to keep a high performance culture. And then another focus is honestly that connection. And so really trying to come up with programming that gets folks in the room together, not even necessarily for work. And that's going to be even including offsites. So team offsites, all company offsites, what that looks like in this COVID world, hoping to do them all in person, but a lot of different initiatives, a lot around learning and development, which is in addition to, a lot of other things we're going to be rolling out.
I think that definitely makes sense. You mentioned employee feedback and just different avenues of people kind of sharing their feedback around the massive kind of life changes and also company
Yeah,
changes and just sharing their opinion about what's going on. Can you share an example of how employee feedback has really inspired or informed a change in policy, strategy, or initiative, whether they're coming directly to you or they gave it
sure.
to the manager or one of the avenues
Yeah,
that you mentioned?
we have a lot, but the one that immediately just popped into my head is one I'm sharing because I was surprised by it, was something not on my radar.
Okay.
So that was through our collective survey last year. They surfaced up in very interesting feeling of extrovert versus introvert. And when I think of diversity, equity, inclusion, that was honestly not on my radar.
Mhm.
That element of how comfortable someone is participating.
Right.
And there was a disconnect of folks feeling like if you're extroverted, maybe you go further, which was shocking to us on the people team. So we changed a lot of our policies regarding meetings and Zoom policies, and really going into our core values. One of them, show up. What does that mean? It doesn't actually mean all the extrovert uh, traits that someone might have.
Yeah.
And so meetings have assigned different roles, really doubling down on making sure everyone in the room has a voice, making sure there's a really clear agenda ahead of time so folks can prepare ahead of time on what they might want to say.
Yeah.
Video on, video off, policies, starting a meeting saying, it's okay if you want to turn your video off, and we don't need a reason why for someone who might not feel comfortable. We changed a lot of different things, but more importantly, and in our culture book, actually, we get really deep into it. We really examined the show up. It's not about popping up to a virtual happy hour. It's not about that. And it actually ties into the accountability aspect that we're weaving throughout the L&D. So learning that there was this underlining extrovert, introvert type of culture that we weren't even not on our radar. We heard a lot, and then we're like, oh yeah, that makes sense, and here's exactly how we'll fix it. That one was interesting, and then we're just transparent about it. We talked to the whole company about the results, the themes that we're pulling out from it, and then how we're addressing it. And we're actually, I think tomorrow, holding another workshop on the most recent collective information for anyone in the company to come in. We share the entire report, the wins and growth areas, and anything that we still need work on. And yeah, we get to talk about how we're going to be addressing it, and they get a say. So that one was really interesting.
I think that is interesting as well, and just making sure that you are capturing this information from folks who might be feeling this way. And in terms of kind of accountability, we've been talking about learning and development, the onboarding process, really making sure people feel like they are invested in. And these all pieces play into this idea of company culture. And in terms of that accountability piece, how do you think about measuring qualitatively and quantitatively kind of your company culture, keeping a pulse on what is happening? Is it the presence of having the culture book, the living document, and making sure that people do feel like they are, growing within the organization? What kind of metrics do you look to?
Well, in terms of metrics, and there's a couple different ways I can answer this. I mean, I report to the board our employee NPS survey, or not survey, our employee NPS results plus a regrettable churn number, because one or the other does not tell the whole story. And so I'm able to speak to those combined. And what that might mean as a whole at the company. But otherwise, I think there's a lot of metrics and work that can be done on the performance management side. And so we recently rolled out a ton of career growth plans that are slightly different than laddering, that are built into all one-on-ones, where there you can make metrics that folks can really have that clarity to, and transparency. And so we have a ton of internal transfers. We actually just did a big announcement. And so that gets, obviously celebrated internally, which is part of our culture. We have a lot of rewards and recognitions. Every month there's a different type of all hands type of meeting. Some are from business leaders, some are from peers. It's really about those connection touch points, so we don't lose our culture. And all the surveys, in providing 1,000 different ways for folks to give feedback, whether it's anonymous or with their name attached. So many different ways, and we just continue to remind folks.
No, I think that definitely makes sense. It's not a one metric, fits all.
Yeah.
That company culture is great. It's also a journey, not a destination. It's something that we continue to work at too, especially as the company continues to grow. In your experience too, so not just at Splash, but in all the companies that you helped foster as well, what is really important to ensure that all employees, recognizing that everybody is kind of different, feels that they belong and are included and are empowered to contribute to an organization?
Being able to have vulnerable conversations that build trust with peers and or managers in a respectful and professional way, of course. But when folks really connect on a more human level,
Yeah.
I think that inclusion starts to increase. I think actions speak louder than words. And so if issues around inclusion get surfaced, there not only has to be action taken, and there's a whole wide range, but constant communication. Even if there is no update, that's the communication. There's no update at this time. Yeah. And so when employees see that you actually listen and take things seriously, I think employees tend to feel more included. One of the things that we started doing was a workshop called Together Apart. And there's different really tough conversations people can opt in. So we kind of built that platform that people can, like I said, opt in. It's not mandatory, but there's been a wide range of topics, and they're really tricky topics. And watching employees talk on these subjects assuming positive intent, coming forward and even admitting if they don't know something, a culture of learning and it's okay to make a mistake.
Mhm.
These topics, they're really tough topics. And a lot of employees have said they've never had these types of conversations at work. And some people don't want to have the conversations, which is why it's totally optional. We want to make sure they're more face-to-face than on a chat system, so there's no misinterpretation. So having that outlet has really helped as well with inclusion and making sure leadership is part of those meetings. We've also rolled out, ERGs, something we didn't have before, and some employees in our LGBTQ plus community wanted. And so we really robust program with executive sponsorship and a budget, and that has come a long way as well. So lots of different areas to help inclusion, and it's constantly changing.
Carving out the space to have those vulnerable conversations is super important, especially for employees who really are looking to their employer to make a space. And I think one of the main kind of touch points in that employee experience too, you might not be talking to chief people officer every day, probably not, or the CEO,
Right.
but talking to your manager every day, and they're fostering the tone of the team. You have
Yeah.
one-on-ones with them more regularly, and not everybody has manager experience, especially if they're moving from an individual contributor role. What resources or training do you provide to specifically those new managers at Splash to
Yeah.
ensure they're creating that really great environment for their team or from their department?
So last year, we had 3 different tracks. So we had the new manager training program. For them, we did go over basics of how to conduct one-on-ones, how to deliver feedback,
Yeah.
how to coach, how to listen, the difference between being an IC to a manager, all of a sudden, what that might mean on a professional level. So those trainings, we've used different vendors in the past, but those happen, and those always happen. We also had an emerging leaders program that was 6 months long, and it was really intense. And those were for managers that were in their position for a little bit, still newish, and really trying to give them skills to level up to leadership positions. And then on top of it, we had peer-to-peer. So we had lunch and learns where managers could have open conversations with each other and share, like, oh my gosh, this same thing happened. How did you handle it? That's so much better than what I did. And vice versa, or just bringing up certain topics ahead of time, or hey, we know this is about to happen. How should we communicate it and get alignment? So the same cascading communications is the same across the company. So there was peer-to-peer, manager one-on-one, and then a little more intense for emerging leaders.
I think that's also just interesting to note too, in terms of giving feedback. It's not this blanket kind of scale. It's like a muscle from peer to peer, like individual to company, manager to
Yeah.
manager. There's all these different relationships, and it's something that needs to be practiced. And again, carving out the space to practice that is important. In terms of figuring out, especially in a kind of remote first world where you're not seeing everyone every day, are there ways that you like prepare to not be caught off guard or figure out like the hidden things that are happening in different parts of the organization, whether it's someone doesn't feel supported by their manager or they
Yeah.
don't know where to find X resource? What do
Yeah.
you think about that?
So we try and be as proactive as possible. So we actually host HR office hours, and it rotates with different HR members. Anyone can pop in during that hour. We make it's on the employee calendar. So everyone always sees it, and people take advantage of it, and they pop in and they talk to us. In addition, we are doing proactive coffee chats. And so just across the whole company, not even talking about work, but hey, how are you? We haven't talked to you in a really long time. And that's for all levels, for every single person at the company. Will take a while because we're a small but mighty HR team, but the idea is to be, as proactive as possible. So we go to the employee before they might have to come to us.
Yeah.
But we found those HR office hours to be really useful, and we appreciate the people that feel comfortable popping up. But if they don't, there's so many other ways to communicate with us. But yeah, those two things have been helping a lot.
Yeah, offering office hours, just and like also building trust proactively with team
Yeah.
members where they've been at the company for a while or they're new hires. It's definitely an avenue for them to kind of share too. Is there, and this can be at Splash or this could be out in the world that you're seeing in the people space, but there's so much innovation happening, especially over the last 3 years. Business as usual is definitely out the window. Is there something that you're really excited by in the people space,
Mm,
whether it's I know you mentioned more kind of mental health and me days. I've seen 4-day
yeah.
work weeks, mental health benefits, asynchronous work, stay interviews, all of these things. What are
Yeah.
you excited about?
Yeah. That everything you said is something that we've thought about, including the 4-day work week. It's still conversation that's really tricky to pull off successfully. There's so many teams that just can't, if they're customer facing, but might try and learn from those who have had successful experiences and figure out if we can pull it off. Let's see. One of the things, trying to think going forward, one of the things last year, which I know you didn't ask, but that we were really ahead of the times was making sure we have one compensation policy in the United States. So everyone gets paid New York City, East Coast salary ranges, regardless of where they live.
Mhm.
I'm seeing more and more companies do that now, but we were definitely one of the first,
A big
which
one.
which helps across everything: recruiting, retainment, and mental health
Yeah,
well-being. And so that is something I guess I'm excited to keep. That's not going away. I think something that is exciting is because of that and other policies we have in place, really expanding globally, being able to work remotely, cast a wide net with talent,
mhm.
really make sure our company is as representative of our users and community as possible. And so that becomes way more realistic to achieve when you can hire almost anywhere. So that trend I am excited about. Um, and I'm, I don't know, just anything, things that are people related sometimes pop up that you're not expecting. So I am excited to be working with really wonderful executive team members who are willing to have these conversations and see what makes sense. And, not every executive team would have even tried the me days. Right. And so I don't even know what we might propose, but knowing that we can have those conversations. And sometimes it doesn't work. We also tried no meeting Fridays. And we actually rolled that back. And to my surprise, managers didn't like it. So employees didn't end up liking it. And I thought we were going to be doing this great thing. And so sometimes it's really just about trial and error and really, going, experimenting and then pivoting as needed.
Absolutely.
So there's probably things I'll be excited about in a few months that I'm not even aware of.
Yeah, I think that's really a key point of innovation too, is not having a fully kind of quote unquote perfect idea if there's ever such a thing, but having that open mindset of just trying something, okay, it didn't work, and trying something else. The me days
Yeah.
are really successful, so keeping those and just seeing what is out there. Compensation is a huge example, so I like that one too. You
Yeah.
mentioned of being representative of your users, of your employees, and of customers in the community that you're in. February 2022. Can't believe we're in 2022.
I know.
How is Splash honoring and celebrating Black History Month this year?
Yeah. So for Black, I think internally we're speaking to as Black Heritage Month. We are dedicating our Together Apart workshop specifically on this topic. We actually, someone on my team has an entire memo and narrative on all of our plans. And I probably need to refresh myself, but I know we are sending out a ton of resources to
Right.
the entire community, from everything from education to workshops they can join to other initiatives we might be doing. In the past, we have had past matching donations. people really enjoy the conversations. And so hopefully there's a good turnout for that. Um, so I know we're doing a lot. We sent an email out to the whole company as well, so they have much notice to be able to join these. But the one that comes to mind off the top of my head is the Together Apart workshop that's completely dedicated to this.
I love it. I think that sounds great and super kind of authentic to the culture at Splash too. What would you say is the next current problem or situation you're trying to solve, knowing that I'm sure you're on many different projects, leading and like involved in many different.
Yeah.
But if you were to pick one off the top of your head.
I think making sure we can pull off this culture of high performance. I mean, it's there. Our employees are phenomenal. Just making sure we're as proactive as possible. And I think we have a lot of things in place that'll help us with that. But making sure the programs we roll out are actually effective. And if not, what else can we bring in? Um, and, checking in and not just kind of checking a box. So I don't know if it's a challenge so much as it's not something we can roll out and forget. We
Right.
have to really actually figure out if it's working and helping, and maybe we need a different type of training. But I think we have a really exciting year ahead of us, and folks are excited of all the things we're going to be releasing and talking about to the public soon. And I think they also want to work hard as well as find the fun, which is one of our employee values as well. And we do find the fun. I manage to laugh every day, even when it's a crazy day. But I think, yeah, just making sure we're being true to our promise of trying to bring in the right training programs.
Yeah, I think that's something that a lot of folks are thinking about too. And it sounds like through all of the examples that you've given and just the trial and error and just the
Yeah.
innovation that has happened over this past year, it sounds like you're on a great path. Liz, is there anything that I didn't ask that you want to share with people who are listening, or maybe 1 to 2 key take
Hmm.
underscore two?
I think just, the market is changing, and people teams and people leaders need to change with it. And we are just hearing over and over again that culture is the number one aspect that candidates are looking for and asking questions about more than ever.
Right.
And they're taking roles that have a great culture, and maybe the salary is not as much as another place, but isn't showing their culture in a good light. And I think people leaders need to lean into that and almost really recognize the creativity they might have to get rolling out new programs or trying out new benefits and perks. But yeah, I mean, it is very much a mental health, wellness, full life picture, culture related environment and market out there. And so I think for anyone trying to get ahead of the game, they really need to focus on culture.
Need to focus on culture. Things are changing every day. The time is now to really focus on that, try different things, ask your
Yeah.
feedback, and really create an employer of choice, somewhere that people get excited, they have fun, as you were talking about, and
Yeah.
enjoy the team they're working with, and also not afraid to have those vulnerable conversations and hard conversations with folks too. So it's a blend of everything. Easier said than done, but got to do it today. Liz, thank you so much for being on Reimagining Company Culture this afternoon.
Thank you for having me. Hope you have a great day.
Of course, and as a reminder for folks who are listening, at AllVoices, we really believe in that employee feedback management as a requirement for the company to really succeed overall. Have a great rest of your afternoon, everyone.